The American Musical Theater, an informal workshop in a series of television biographies of people whose personal contribution to the musical theater has made it a native American art. With Alfredo Antonini and the CBS Orchestra. With guest Richard Rodgers and singers Martha Wright and John Reardon. With students from the New York City high schools. And the host for the workshop, Jim Morske.
Thank you, Maestro. Well, that song was from a landmark in the American Musical Theater. What was the show? Larry? Oklahoma. What was the name of the song? Josie?
I Can't Say No.
I Can't Say No, from 1943, Oklahoma's first presentation on Broadway. And for the first time, that show introduced the team of Rodgers and Hammerstein to Broadway. Of course, before that, each of those gentlemen had worked separately in the American Musical Theater. Richard Rodgers with Larry Hart, and he told us about that collaboration last week. Oscar Hammerstein had worked with a number of other composers, and can you name some of them for me? Elliot? Jerome Kern was one. Vic?
I believe Sigmund Romberg.
Sigmund Romberg. Rudolf Rimmel was another. Herbert Stothert was a third. But it was as a team that Rodgers and Hammerstein dominated Broadway and began a new era in the American Musical Theater. And here with us today to tell us about that new era and about his partnership with Oscar Hammerstein, back for a second visit, is the foremost composer in the American Musical Theater, Mr. Richard Rodgers. Let's greet him again. Hello, Dick. Come sit down. Well, you didn't have your fill of us last week.
No, I didn't get enough.
Oh, that went by so quickly, too. Now, we come to Oscar Hammerstein. Now, how did the two of you meet for the first time, and when did you decide to collaborate on Broadway musicals?
Well, let me answer the first part of the question first.
All right.
Oscar and I must have met physically when we were very, very small children, because my father, I told you this last week, was a doctor.
Yes.
And he was the obstetrician who delivered Oscar's first two children.
Oh, what a coincidence. Mm-hmm.
And Oscar even married a second or third cousin of mine. So I always knew Oscar. I knew him when he was a young man in college and I was a young man in high school. Mm-hmm. And my brother took me to see a varsity show at the Astor Hotel that Oscar had written. And Oscar was in it, too. And we met then. Then a few years later, I wrote a varsity show with Larry Hart. And Oscar was on the committee of three men who chose the show as the annual musical presentation.
So you had known him over the years.
Oh, yes.
And what brought about your partnership?
Well, what actually brought it about was Larry's disintegration. Larry started to fall apart at a much too early age, and I knew it was coming, and I had tremendous faith in Oscar. And I went to see Oscar, and I said, this man is going to go. He isn't going to be able to work much more. What would you think about working together? And he said, I accept your proposal of marriage. And within a couple of years, we were working together. Because Larry couldn't work anymore, and Oscar and I started with Oklahoma.
Vic has a question.
In collaborating, how is Mr. Hart different than Mr. Hammerstein?
Well, you think of it, and that was it.